It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon in the quiet town of Elmswood. The sun poured golden warmth over the tree-lined streets, the occasional rustle of leaves riding the soft breeze. People moved at a lazy pace, mothers pushing strollers, retirees watering their flower beds, a teenager practicing kickflips on the sidewalk. Officer Daniel Brooks sat in his patrol car near the corner of Oak and Maple, sipping coffee from a foam cup, idly scanning traffic with no urgency. In small towns like Elmswood, crime was rarely more than a misplaced bicycle or an unpaid parking ticket. The calm was familiar, routine. But within the next hour, something would unfold that would ripple through every corner of the Elmswood Police Department. It would change how two officers saw their job, their assumptions, and perhaps even their place in the very system they thought they understood. It began with a man named Franklin Tate. Franklin walked with a measured limp and wore a faded army jacket whose original green had long turned to gray. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes quiet and observant beneath a cap with no insignia. Most townsfolk knew little about him, only that he lived in a modest cabin nestled in the woods just past the river bend. Some said he'd been there for decades. Others thought he had moved in only a few years back. Either way, Franklin never caused trouble. He came into town for groceries, sat on the park bench to feed the birds, and nodded at those who nodded first. That afternoon, Franklin entered Hawthorne's Market, the town's only grocery store, with its brass bell jingling overhead as he stepped in. He moved slowly through the aisles, carefully selecting a loaf of wheat bread, a can of lentil soup, and a small carton of milk. He smiled faintly at the cashier, then stood patiently behind a young man at the counter. The man was in a rush, juggling a phone call and a bag of frozen peas while digging for his wallet. Suddenly, the wallet dropped to the floor. The man bent slightly, cursed under his breath, and walked out hastily, too distracted to realize what he'd left behind. What happened next was a storm formed from a spark. The cashier, a woman named Mallory who had only worked at Hawthorne's for 6 weeks, glanced up, noticed the wallet gone, then looked back down. She saw Franklin bending slowly with effort. He had picked up something. Her eyes narrowed. "You," she barked. "You just took that man's wallet." Franklin straightened, clearly startled. "No, ma'am," he replied calmly. "He dropped it. I was going to give it to you." "Don't lie to me," Mallory snapped, already reaching for the store phone. "I saw you. You picked it up and slipped it into your jacket." "I didn't," Franklin began, but his voice was soft, the kind of voice that didn't cut through tension well. Mallory was already calling the police. By the time Franklin reached into his pocket to retrieve the wallet, the accusation had already bloomed into certainty. Officer Brooks and his partner, Officer Lucas Dre, arrived minutes later. The store manager, a broad-shouldered man named Darren, pointed without hesitation. "That's him, right there. Tried to steal that guy's wallet. Caught him red-handed." Franklin opened his mouth, but before he could explain, Officer Dre stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." "There's been a misunderstanding," Franklin said. "I was trying to return it. I didn't take anything." "Let's talk about it at the station," Dre interrupted. Brooks hesitated, watching the older man's calm demeanor. But procedure was procedure. He stepped forward. Franklin complied without resistance, though the cuffs clamped harshly over his wrists. Outside, people had begun to gather, neighbors, shoppers, some murmuring, others filming. Franklin was placed into the back of the cruiser without further word. At the station, Dre tossed Franklin's jacket onto the bench with a grunt and led him to a holding cell. "You know, theft's a serious charge," he said with a dry smirk. Franklin sat quietly. His eyes moved slowly across the room, not panicked, not pleading, just still. "There's something off about him," Brooks whispered to Dre later as they stood behind the glass. Dre chuckled. "He's probably a professional. Knows how to act calm." As Brooks processed the paperwork, he reached into Franklin's jacket to check for identification. Inside a concealed inner pocket, his fingers brushed metal. He pulled it out, a badge. Not a police badge. A military one. Heavy, weathered but gleaming. At the center, an eagle perched on a shield, and beneath it, the words, "United States Special Operations, Clearance Alpha." "What is this?" Brooks muttered. Dre leaned in. That looks real." Inside the wallet, they found only a few worn bills and a military ID that looked nothing like any they had ever seen. No expiration date. No rank. Just the name, Franklin Tate. Unnerved, Brooks dialed a number printed on the back of the ID. It rang once. "This is Agent Mitchell, Bureau," came a clipped voice. This is Officer Daniel Brooks from Elmswood PD. We have a man in custody. Franklin Tate. Arrested for suspected theft." There was a pause. Not a normal kind of pause. A vacuum. "Repeat that name," the voice demanded. "Franklin Tate." Silence again. Then, "You're holding Franklin Tate?" "Yes, sir." Agent Mitchell's voice returned. Sharp, controlled. "Listen carefully. Secure your station. Do not talk to him. Do not question him. Do not let anyone near him. We're arriving in 30. Click." Brooks stared at the phone. Dre's expression had drained of all color. What the hell's going on? Franklin, meanwhile, sat quietly in the cell. He looked up when the door opened and said, almost kindly, "You may want to brew another pot. It's going to be a long day." 30 minutes later, the calm of the station shattered. Four black SUVs rolled to a stop outside. The doors opened, and a dozen federal agents in black suits stepped out. They moved like clockwork, tight, controlled, precise. One stepped up to the desk. "Where is he?" Brooks pointed mutely. They walked directly to the cell. The door opened. No weapons drawn, no tension, just deep, unspoken reverence. "Mr. Tate," one of them said, "our deepest apologies for the inconvenience. Let's get you home." Franklin nodded, stood slowly, and shook the agent's hand. Brooks and Dre stood frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. As the SUVs pulled away, one agent lingered. He approached the two officers with eyes hard as glass. "You don't know who he is, do you?" They shook their heads. Franklin Tate was embedded in 5 of the most dangerous combat zones on Earth. He's led operations that aren't listed in any public record. He's saved thousands of lives from threats most Americans will never even know existed. His file is above my clearance, and I work at Quantico. The agent stepped closer. He's not just a veteran. He's a protector of this country's darkest corners. You're lucky he's patient. Many in his line of work wouldn't be. When the agent left, Brooks sat down heavily. Dre broke the silence. "We cuffed him. We pushed him into the car like a criminal. We never asked what happened," Brooks murmured. "We never listened." A week passed. Then a letter arrived at the station. It was written in simple cursive on unlined paper. It read, "To Officers Brooks and Dre. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we carry what we learn. Stay sharp. Stay humble. Franklin Tate." Enclosed was a military challenge coin. Thick, gold-edged, marked with an emblem neither man had ever seen before. Dre turned it over in his hand, speechless. Sometimes, the people you least suspect carry the heaviest stories. Sometimes, the man you walk past on the street is the one who kept your world intact when you didn't even know it was under threat. Franklin Tate had lived in silence. But that silence was forged in fire, in sacrifice, and in a kind of courage that didn't need to be declared. And after that day, nothing in Elmswood, certainly not in its police station, would ever be the same again.